The reign of the Chinese factory is over. For 40 years, Made in China was the undisputed law of the global economy. But in 2025, that law is being shredded. Thousands of factories in China are locking their gates for the last time. And as the smoke clears in Shenzhen, a new giant is emerging right next door: Vietnam. While China's economy is suffocating under rising costs and political tension, Vietnam is exploding. Apple, Samsung, and Intel aren't just looking at Vietnam. They are moving their entire futures there. This isn't just a relocation. It's the greatest industrial migration of the 21st century. Why is the world's superpower losing its grip? And how did Vietnam, a country once shattered by war, become the only place left that can save the global supply chain? The data reveals a brutal reality that Beijing doesn't want you to see. Here's why China is losing and how Vietnam is winning. Let's look at the cold, hard numbers. In 2025, China is no longer the bargain it used to be. Labor costs in Chinese manufacturing hubs like Dongguan and Shenzhen have surged by over 300% in a decade. It is now officially more expensive to hire a factory worker in parts of China than in several Eastern European countries. But it's not just the price, it's the people. You might ask, what about the 1.4 billion people? The reality is, China is running out of workers. Their workforce is aging rapidly due to decades of the one-child policy. There simply aren't enough young people left to fill the assembly lines. Add to that the unstable energy grid and sudden power quotas. With labor costs rising and the workforce vanishing, the China advantage officially disappears. Now, look at the other side of the border. In 2025, Vietnam recorded a record-breaking $25 billion in foreign direct investment. While China's manufacturing sector struggles to breathe, Vietnam is growing at 9% year on year. This growth isn't accidental. Over the past decade, Vietnam has been quietly building an economic fortress. They've signed 16 different free trade agreements, linking their factories directly to every major consumer market on Earth. This includes massive deals like the major Trans-Pacific trade deals and the EU-Vietnam Free Trade Agreement, allowing goods to flow to Europe and the Americas without the heavy tariffs that now plague Chinese exports. This isn't just a trend, it's a structural replacement of the world's industrial core. For 40 years, China was considered untouchable. They built their empire on three pillars that the world thought would last forever. First, an infinite supply of dirt-cheap labor. Second, total geopolitical cooperation and a blind eye from the West. Third, a complete monopoly over global logistics. By the year 2000, China wasn't just a manufacturer, it was the only logical option. If you wanted to build at scale and survive, you went to China. But then the world changed. The trade war with the United States didn't just bring taxes, it brought a permanent sense of risk. Made in China suddenly became a liability for global corporations rather than an asset. Then, the zero-COVID era happened. China's sudden, brutal lockdowns paralyzed global brands for months. Factories went dark, ports froze, and the world's supply of everything from car parts to basic electronics simply stopped. And this is exactly where Beijing's absolute control started to backfire. CEOs in Silicon Valley, Seoul, and Tokyo realized they were gambling their entire company's future on a single country that could shut down at any moment. They needed an escape hatch. They needed what the industry calls China Plus One, a strategy of keeping a presence in China but moving the core manufacturing to a safer, more stable alternative. And Vietnam was the only nation ready to take the call. Location is everything in the world of manufacturing. Vietnam shares a massive 1,300-kilometer land border with China. This is Vietnam's ultimate weapon. It means a company can keep its complex component suppliers in China and truck the parts across the border to Vietnamese assembly lines in just a few hours. This proximity is vital. It allows companies to leave China's political risks without actually leaving the Asian industrial ecosystem. They get the safety of Vietnam and the supply chain of China at the same time. But the real winner is the cost-to-quality ratio. The average wage in Vietnam is still roughly one-third of what workers earn in China. However, Vietnam is no longer just a place for cheap labor. They have invested billions in technical education, creating a generation of workers who can handle high-tech electronics just as well as their Chinese counterparts. Vietnam isn't just making shoes and t-shirts anymore. They are building the brain of the modern world. But it's not just about the workers, it's about who is actually moving the money. The result was inevitable. Samsung was the first to see the writing on the wall. They closed their last smartphone factory in China years ago and moved almost everything to Vietnam. Today, over 50% of all Samsung phones sold globally are made in Vietnam. In some provinces, Samsung alone accounts for nearly 20% of Vietnam's total exports. This wasn't just about saving money. It was about building a new future in a country that welcomed them. And then there is Apple. For 20 years, Apple and China were inseparable. The iPhone was the symbol of Chinese industrial might. But in the last 2 years, that relationship has fractured. Apple has moved significant production of iPads, MacBooks, and AirPods to Vietnam. Foxconn, Apple's primary manufacturer, is pouring billions into new facilities in Vietnam's northern provinces, building entire mini-cities for workers. When Apple moves, the entire world of electronics follows. China is watching its crown jewel being handed over to its neighbor, and there is almost nothing Beijing can do to stop it. There is a deeper reason for this shift: geopolitics. In Washington and London, made in China is now seen as a strategic threat. But made in Vietnam? That's a green light. Vietnam has played a masterstroke of diplomacy, becoming a friend to everyone. They have secured 16 free trade agreements, giving their factories duty-free access to markets representing 60% of the global GDP. They are a critical partner to the US and a key member of the Southeast Asian Trade Alliance. This allows a product built in Vietnam to reach 450 million Europeans and 330 million Americans without the 25% tariffs that now kill Chinese profit margins. Vietnam didn't just build factories, they built a diplomatic fortress. They offered the West exactly what it wanted: a way to decouple from China without losing the efficiency and speed of Asian manufacturing. Every morning in industrial hubs like Dong Nguyen, more gates are being locked, and every morning in Vietnamese provinces like Bac Ninh and Dong Nai, new factories are opening their doors. Every afternoon, a container ship leaves the port of Haiphong or Ho Chi Minh City headed for Los Angeles, filled with goods that used to say "Made in China," but now say "Made in Vietnam." Is Vietnam perfect? No. Its ports are becoming crowded, its power grid is struggling to keep up with the demand, and land prices are rising rapidly, but the momentum is undeniable. While China tries to pivot into a high-tech fortress, it is losing its grip on the world's assembly lines, the very foundation of its economic power. Vietnam went from an isolated, war-torn nation to a top 20 global trader in record time. It is a story of adaptation, openness, and perfect timing. China is shedding jobs. Vietnam is creating them. China is defensive and increasingly isolated. Vietnam is booming and globally integrated. This proves one thing: in the global economy, nobody is too big to fail. China thought the world had no choice but to stay. They believed their scale made them irreplaceable. Vietnam proved them wrong, because if you build your empire on the assumption that the world will never change, you've already lost. The map is being redrawn, and for the first time in 40 years, the center of gravity is moving. China didn't lose because it was weak. It lost because it believed it was irreplaceable. Vietnam didn't wait for permission. It became the alternative the world was desperate for. And in the global economy, that makes them untouchable. The age of China is fading, and the age of the new Asian tiger has officially begun.